Okay, so we're going to make an attempt at this because I keep explaining this in various places, and honestly, I'm getting annoyed by it. Which is not to say I'm annoyed with you guys, the users. It's just repeating yourself can be pretty straining, especially when you do it at least 6 times a day. But so we're going to do this. I'm going to explain to you why I've rewrote mini mods. And to put it in a really simple way, when you develop software, you don't just stick with something and keep going. It's a really, really bad idea. Even if whatever you had was good. Because what happens when you stick with a single concept is it stagnates and you don't go anywhere. You just keep reiterating the same junk over and over again. This is one of the driving forces behind rewriting things like ICBM. Because when ICBM was developed, the very first version, and we're talking like ICBM 0 point something, this is the one that Cal Clavi originally made. This is the one that predates universal electricity. Your missile launcher was a dispenser, and you couldn't do crap with it. You could set it to launch a missile in any of the cardinal directions, so north, south, east, and west, and you picked your range. So you had to be lined up with what your target was. You picked your range at like 1,000 and you fired the thing. And it fired this little arrow looking thing up, and it would come back down and explode. That wasn't really cool, so it got developed again. We went from having the dispenser and the arrow to having a dispenser that fired an actual missile. This is when you started getting actual missile models, things that look like this thing right here. You still couldn't see them. They still fired out of a dispenser. They went up, they came down. Then we got the actual launchers. Then these things, the little frames on the side. Well, technically not the frames per se, because the frames didn't come the way later. But you could see the missile now in that version, but it still went up and came down. Then we started getting things like the frames on the sides to increase accuracy, stability, a lot of like minor logic improvements. See, then you got the control panel, which you see over here, which can then let you actually set coordinates. So now you could pick exactly where your missile went. This then developed out into a little bit more complexity where you have the back rail there for even more accuracy. And then of course now you have 3 tiers. The tier launchers were simply added as a gating system, and when in reality, if you can see from the recipes down here, they didn't cost much. So everybody ended up building the highest tier, which defeated the purpose of the complexity. But as versions went, we kept developing content out, adding more and more to the thing. But when we started hitting the final versions, this is when Cal Clavi stopped really working on the mod. And people like me, Aiden, a few other developers started maintaining the project. So we were the people that were actually putting development insight into it, and we weren't allowed to really do anything. We got to add content. Like eventually, I ended up talking Cal Clavi into doing things like sentry guns, though this was in an attempt to kind of prevent us from competing with each other, because at the time I was developing sentry guns, he was developing sentry guns. I think there was like one other person doing it as well, and we all went like, hey, let's just collaborate and save ourselves the headache of having 3 different versions that now people are asking for cross compatibility support, and then we get in a competition of whose turret can be better. Instead, let's have an internal competition of who can make this mod better. And we made some amazing sentry guns. Even though the version only had, I believe, 3 guns, there was actually like 20. Just not a lot of them actually ended up getting developed. If you've seen some of my early YouTube videos from back in like 2012 and stuff, you'll see some of those actual sentry guns. But back to the initial subject of why I rewrote things. So when I took over completely, this is back when UE was still a thing, Cal Clavi pretty much just told me, hey, just do what you want to do. But still make sure you get content approval from me. The mod kind of still stagnated. And it wasn't even just because I had to get approval from Cal Clavi or I couldn't come up with any ideals. We were working within the constraints that what was already there. So we had a radar dish, which didn't really do much. It literally spotted targets and you could do redstone with it. There wasn't a lot of support we could really add to it. We ended up adding computer craft support and open computer support to it eventually, but that just gave you a little bit more control. There wasn't a true radar system, and rewriting the whole thing would break everybody's maps, so we were screwed. We then couldn't really do much with the launchers because now the launchers are pretty much you're stuck with these multi-block launchers. You can't change the structure because then you break people's maps, which technically we ended up doing, or at least I ended up doing anyways, but I made sure to do it during a Minecraft update, so not as bad. But forced to have multi-block structures, forced to have this and that, because that's how the mod was developed. But what really kind of stagnated the mod was all the missiles had to have a unique model, and they had to have a block and a grenade, and you had to manually code all of that. So every explosive resulted in a unique missile, and every explosive needed a unique missile. Theoretically, you could copy the same model over and over again, but that kind of was self-defeating. But you had to manually code everything in, and there wasn't a lot of flexibility. There wasn't also a lot of really for the player to do. You just build a missile and you launched it, and that was it. Build missile, launch missile, build missile, launch missile. There was no uniqueness, there was no complexity, there was no real challenge to the mod. There was nothing to really do beyond build missiles and kill each other. This made the mod kind of not really that desirable outside of PvP communities, and that was a pretty big deal, is because we want the mod, at least I wanted the mod, to adhere to usages beyond just murdering each other. This is where, in the new versions, you start to see a lot of utility missiles. We brought back things like region missiles. We have biome shift missiles. There's actual terraforming missiles. The fire missiles are not just for killing people. You can deforest with them. There's actual missiles designed for deforestation. But moving back to the ideal of the missile complexity. So, original version, you just build a missile. What I wanted to see was people actually spend time customizing missiles. So you took a missile, you actually got to pick what the engine was, what your guidance system was, what your warhead was, how your trigger device works, how you even launch it. The old version didn't allow for that without a complete rewrite, right? Because all the code was built on top of this ideal that you had one thing and that was it. It did one thing. Now the new version allows for tremendous API-driven development. A missile can literally do anything now, and the missiles are also not dependent on any hard-coded behavior. So we can change the underlying behavior whenever we want. People can come in and code new explosives, and the explosives are not dependent on ICBMs. You don't have to support ICBM to add explosives. You can actually just support the Volts Engine explosive system, which tremendously allows for really cool things to be done. I can now make grenades, grenade launchers, bullets, weapons. I can actually use the explosive system for different things like terraforming stuff, where I can have this item I can plant on the ground and it triggers an explosive that's a terraformer. This also has allowed us to do other things, like we've actually abstracted the explosive code. We've got it separated into world edit handler, and then the explosive system is built on top of the world edit handler. So now we have a built-in world edit system and a Volts engine. Even though you can't use commands to activate it, mods internally can now manipulate the world, and they don't have to do it inside the main thread, which allows for huge performance increases. Because half of the slowdown of manipulating the world is just collecting data. So when you go to world edit's going, okay, what's this block ID? Should I edit it? What is this block ID? Should I edit it? And it'll continuously keep doing that over and over and over again until it finally goes around and gets everything processed and then edits everything. Volts engine, what it does is it opens up well, it actually doesn't open a thread, because when the game is launched, I launch one thread short of the number of CPUs you have, which for most people ends up being 3. This is fully customizable, of course. But these threads can be loaded with data. So we can go, okay, I want you to process power grids, I want you to process explosives, world edit, whatever. We can edit this all outside the world. This is something we couldn't do with the previous ICBM version, because everything was hard-coded. Everything was set up to be triggered by the missile, which then would call an explosive class, and the explosive class would then do a whole bunch of method calls. Given we could have modified this, but that would have taken rewrite, which would then have ended up with, well, actually, most of you guys probably don't care about the code side of things. So let's go to back to the content. So the idea of rewriting the content was to allow the player to do more. So examples of this, we now have radio systems, so you can wirelessly communicate between your silos, which in this picture you can pretty much see kind of how it works. I honestly need to get a better picture. But in this example, we have a small little radio network here that's connected to this antenna, which can communicate to this antenna, which is actually being controlled by this controller. So in this controller, I can see every one of these silos over here. I can select them, I can fire them, I can command them. I can connect laser detonators to this terminal, remote detonators. I can even do computer craft support. That's actually an option. And I can wirelessly broadcast, I believe, up to 20 kilometers with this antenna. And there is a relay system being worked on right now, so in theory you could go cross-map with it, and there'll be satellite systems and really cool stuff like that. But this is something we couldn't do with the previous version because the code wasn't there and everything would need a rewrite. Another thing is we can do stuff like this. The previous version, when a missile impacted, it stuck there. It blew up. It was gone. We can now have the missile impact in the ground and stay there. And then it can trigger its explosive or trigger its action. This is, of course, being created for things like the slime rain missile, which will have rain slime out of the or slime spawn from the sky, dawn on the ground. Static effects, EMP generators, mob spawners. You can do cargo delivery missiles. That's a feature being worked on right now. It's let us do more things. One of the things are also the rewrites let us do, if I can find a picture here. I guess, well, a bit short on pictures. I need to go through. But we have more launchers that are actually bigger, not just slightly bigger. Because if I can find a picture, it's a downside. I need to go through and actually archive all my pictures. But there should be. Let's see, Minecraft mods, wrong mods folder, projects. Let's see what we got here. Wow. Here we go. This is what I'm looking for. So this is the lineup of all the missiles from the first version. That's literally all the missiles you had. They only slightly got bigger than the next iteration. They didn't change much. They literally all look the same. The texture changed, and then the tip changed. We are planning on adding the tip change back eventually, but our modelers have pretty much told me to fuck off and wait for them to do things. So, yeah, we gotta wait on them. But it'll happen eventually. But with the rewrite, what we can do with the larger launchers, we can now have big missiles. And right now we've only got the micro missile implemented, which is a rocket launcher propelled grenade, those things you see the Al-Qaeda fighters fire. We then have a small missile, which is basically your Jeep mounted tow that you see American soldiers fire off of the other vehicles. We now have the standard missile, which is what you would more expect to be seen fired off of a cruiser. But that's not all we have planned. There's a medium and a large missile. The medium is like your short-range anti-ship, anti-large target missiles that the military uses. And then the large is the actual full-sized ICBMs. This is something the rewrite has allowed us to do. And that adds a huge amount of dynamic to the game now because we can have huge sizes. And now they're fully API driven too, which means a mod can come in and add another missile without us having to teach them how to do a lot of stuff. They just supply the model, supply its height, texture file, and we take care of the rest. And then they can come in and add warheads to fit inside that missile. They can control what parts go into it. Like somebody can make a Thaumcraft missile that runs off of whatever the liquid is from that mod. I completely have spaced out today. And it could have it where it's covered in taint, so you have taint tentacles coming off the top of it that actually move and wiggle around inside the launcher, and on impact it spawns a huge taint biome. Although you could do that with a small missile, it's the thought process is that you can do that. You can make customized missiles now. Customize just about everything. Everything is API driven. Make your own antennas. This antenna system, by the way, is built directly into Volt's engine. So any mod can come in and build their own antennas for whatever they want to do. A lot of the missile projectile code is built into Volt's engine, so anybody can come in and build their own missiles. Things like this, though, are ICBM exclusive because, yeah, that makes funny things happen. That being said, we do have some of the sentry guns coming back here. So the rewrite's not getting rid of content. That's one big thing people keep thinking the rewrite was getting rid of things. The rewrite is only modifying the behavior of things, and it's just been taking us a while to get there because I've have to write thousands of lines of code to make things work. And part of the rewrite was also to get rid of a lot of archaic code, because some of that code dated back to alpha versions of Minecraft and was all in Chinese. So even though I can technically read Chinese words that are in English, so if they're like written with English characters, I can read them. But it made it really difficult to develop the mod, because I have to constantly go back and go, okay, what's this word mean? What's that word mean? Eventually I memorized what things like missile stands for, grenade. But yeah, that didn't help. A lot of the code was really buggy. Huge performance issues. Like, we had a chunk loading system for the missile, so the missile actually flew around. Although that was cool and allowed for a lot of dynamic gameplay, the new version pretends like it's loaded. So the missile's there, but at the same time not there. This way the chunks are not loading, your world's not lagging, you're not having issues. The missile just goes, reappears somewhere near the target, and then at that point the AA guns can shoot it down, or the anti-missile systems can shoot it down. And technically the AA guns can tie into our missile entity system, which then will tell them exactly where the missile is, so they can shoot it down even before the player can see it. Of course, this also ties in the radar system. Radar system tracks it all, and a lot of cool little things that have come through from the rewrite. But since I'm pretty much rambling and didn't plan this video at all, I'm just going to end it here and make a couple more.